Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism midweek show. You see I'm in different surroundings today as well. Great to be back. We're going to discuss a lot of things that are going on just now in the rest of the world. I said on the weekend show how I really wanted to be talking about what happened in The Hague and what's going on in Gaza, because it's so important to what's going to happen in the world. I mean, if we can get an independence, but the way things are going with the West, we could have a world war, a Holocaust, and not only would there be no Scotland, there'd be no world. So it's important that we talk about these things. But today, I really wish I could be talking about what happened yesterday down in the House of Commons. So it just keeps happening, but we'll discuss that at the weekend, because what happened there has a big bearing on our country and going forward. But let me get in my guests today. I've got to help me. I've got Yvonne and Lloyd both here to help me with this topic today. Yvonne and Lloyd, welcome.
Hi, Roddy. The sun is shining. I can't feel it, but I'm in the sunny borders.
Yeah, good for you. And there, you've not got the weather with you, Lloyd. Is it snowing there?
No, it's very cold, but it is sunny. Being in the East Coast, it's always that little bit more sunny. But yeah, we live in interesting times, Roddy.
We sure do. I don't want to hang about. Let's get going. This week and last week, The Hague, I really want to talk about. But firstly, can I just start? Things are going on in Yemen, as we all know about. But Techie, could you stick up the video of Chris Bryant? I want to show you how he explained the attacks by the Americans and British against the Houthis in Yemen.
There's a real problem, of course, for everybody in the West and for the whole of world trade, because 50% of trade goes through that route. The Houthis have been deliberately attacking. They're pretending that it's something to do with the conflagration in the Middle East, but we need to be absolutely clear that they cannot start attacking and seizing hold of international shipping. Every time one of those ships has to go take the alternative route round the bottom of Africa, it adds another 10 days and roughly something like £1 million worth to the cost. So consumers in the UK will feel that, and it harms international trade. It's likely to lead to significant further problems for inflation. So we do have to take action.
We do have to take actions because the Houthis are pretending, Lloyd, that it's about stopping a genocide in Gaza, and it's going to cost us money. So we're doing this for inflationary purposes. I don't know about you. When I heard that, I was enraged, insulted, and very angry.
But this man, he always seems to surpass himself with his inanity. But it shows you what is the central thinking of both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party here in Britain. It's all about the finance. It's all about the money. Since Thatcher destroyed our manufacturing industry, they're absolutely dependent on the price of the pound. And sure, ships having to sail round Cape Horn rather than going through the Suez Canal is going to cost money. But the fact of the matter is, this is about a bigger issue than simply an increase in tax or an increase for the consumers. This is about the rights of people to have freedom and the right to run their own countries. It's ridiculous. Here we are, 1968, Britain pulled out of Aden, the southern part of Yemen, and here we are back there yet again. It's pathetic, Roddy, it really is.
Yeah, Mad Mitch and whatnot. Yvonne, when you heard Chris Bryant, who very possibly could be in Starmer's cabinet, spewing such drivel and nonsense, lies, basic lies, it's about controlling inflation, is why we're trying to kill Houthis. Did you not just shake your head, or were you angry?
Well, of course I was. I mean, he said it himself, it's global trade, it's money. They're not moved by the sight of babies being killed, children being operated on without anaesthetic. The plight of the innocents who are just bleeding to death in Gaza, they're not bothered at all. But as soon as it starts to hit them in the pocket, they suddenly get very agitated. And you know, the Houthi movement makes no pretense about what it's there for. This is the party. It's known officially as Ansar Allah, which are the supporters of God. And their slogan is, God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam. There's nothing in there about let's shaft world trade. You know, they're quite blunt and direct about what they believe in. They are in solidarity with the people of Palestine, and in particular the people of Gaza. And the Houthis have been bombed to hell by the West. They couldn't give a stuff about global trade. If they really cared about global trade and shafting the world's economy, they would have started this a lot sooner. They've been around since 2004, and I don't think they've enjoyed such a global reputation as they have now. And they are 100% behind the Palestinians and make no bone about how they feel about the rest of the West and how they feel about Israel. So Chris is he's talking out his backside. He's totally wrong. And it just shows how they're just not reading the runes, or they're just not telling people the truth. I suspect it's the latter, actually, than the former. They're treating us all like idiots, and they're trying to portray the Houthis as these saboteurs of who are a bunch of terrorists who aren't interested in Gaza. They're just fanatical about destroying world trade, which, as I say, is wrong. But it's a narrative that the BBC is pushing, and it suits them at the moment. The truth is that the Houthis, as heroic as some people think their action is, they haven't killed any babies. They haven't killed any pregnant women. They haven't killed any old people. You know, they've fired a few missiles off and completely shown how vulnerable the US Navy is. The tiger, and the Americans don't like being humiliated in this way as well. So if America doesn't like it, Britain, the loyal lapdog is there, and Chris has just exemplified all that. Shame on him.
Well, for a country that doesn't like being the US being humiliated, why the hell did they elect George Bush, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden? Seems to me they love humiliation. I mean, I'd be humiliated about that. But the other thing is, they've not killed a sailor, Lloyd. They haven't killed anyone. They've been killed. And they've been, as Yvonne alludes to, they've been getting bombed for years. Again, a US assisted and British assisted with the Saudis, who have now pulled back and said, no, we don't want any part of this. Do they actually think the gunboat diplomacy will work?
It seems that they do think this will work. I think what it exemplifies is the fact that very few of our current crop of politicians, senior politicians in the United States, Europe, or in Britain, appear to have read a history book. You know, the importance of Yemen, the importance of Aden, the entrance to the Red Sea, and the Horn of Africa are absolutely vital to international trade, and always have been, which is why the West and the imperial powers spent so much time in the 19th century controlling that area and effectively controlling the people through military might. Now, those days are over. you need to be talking to people. The fact that the British government, particularly the Americans as well, are attempting to present the Houthis in some ways as these mad rebel people. In fact, they're always described as the rebel Houthis, but no one explains to us who they are rebelling against. I mean, what really they're rebelling against is the Western interference in their country, and that's why there has been a war in Yemen for this period of time. But again, Roddy, week on week, day on day, we're constantly at the same thing. The governments of the West believe that might is always right, and they will use it in every single circumstance that they can. And ultimately, we know, the ordinary people know, in the end, you have to talk. They are not going about this in the right way. If you want, it's a very, very simple thing. And Yvonne hinted at it, and you hinted at it as well. The Houthis have killed no one, and they have made very clear that what their purpose is. Their purpose is to prevent any goods going to Israel through their waters until there is a ceasefire in Gaza. And the killing stops in Gaza. Now, I would suggest those are perfectly reasonable terms, but it would also seem to be that the West has no understanding of how perfectly reasonable the request from the Houthis actually is. In the end, they have to talk, and the sooner they talk, the better. The better for the people of Yemen, the better for the people of Saudi Arabia, most especially better for the people of Gaza.
Yeah, but the prefix it with Iran-backed Houthis. They always like to throw in that, but they don't turn around and say the US-backed Israel regime or the US-backed Kiev regime. But they always do that one. But the thing here, Yvonne, is if Iran decides to close the Straits of Hormuz, Hormuz Straits, then international shipping is going to go nowhere. And we've already got BP, Shell, Maersk, who are refusing to go through. But there's a blockade, and there's been a blockade for decades in Gaza of shipping. The same people who are bombing the Houthis because of it, they've allowed that to happen. There's never a word said about that blockade, is there?
No, and it is interesting to note that the waters off Gaza are in the Eastern Mediterranean, the same waters that are fished by the Spanish, the French, the Greeks, right across Europe, and yet the Palestinians in Gaza are not allowed to go more than 2 miles before they get targeted, sometime sooner, by the Israelis. And this action by the Houthis is actually what they're doing is they're showing how vulnerable the trade routes are. And this is something that we covered quite extensively in a recent Prism about the strategic value of the Suez Canal. Mm-hmm. But yes, as soon as it involves the world and world trade and money, big money, then suddenly politicians start to find reasons for military action. And the Houthis aren't our enemies, but we really need to be wary of any blowback. I mean, we got 7/7 directly because of the invasion of Iraq. And the world is a less safe place now that Britain and America have gone to war with the Houthis. And interestingly enough, one of their closest allies, Oman, have said, you're not using our airspace to fire rockets at the Houthis, which is very interesting because this is the first time that one of the Gulf states has stood up to America and Britain and said, no, we don't agree with you. And they have intervened. If any more Gulf states intervene, then that really is going to have an impact on America and Britain. They're putting up with Oman at the moment, But, you know, Oman represents millions, if not billions of dollars worth of trade for arms deals. And so it's really significant that just a couple of days ago, Oman turned around and said, you can't use our airspace to attack the Houthis. There is a great opportunity here for the Arab world to come together and show some leadership. But at the moment, they're not taking it up, which is, as I say, a great shame.
Yep, but at least the Saudis and UAE, who were at war with Yemen, they're not taking part in this exercise either. So that in itself is a bit encouraging.
Yeah, no, it is. And, you know, we've seen that awful Anthony Blinken doing all this shuttle diplomacy between the states. But, you know, America's role in this is quite disgraceful. And America will not be judged kindly by history for what is an ongoing genocide in Gaza.
Well, I think it's worth noting, Yvonne, that when the America was founded, they did some ethnic cleansing and get rid of the Native Americans. So it's in their blood to do that and steal land. So that's why they don't see anything wrong with Israel. That's
why the Americans won't ratify the International Court of Justice, because the moment they do, they'll be hit with a writ for the genocide of the indigenous population. Yeah, but they're allowed a judge in the court, which I know, and we're going to come on to that. But just while Chris Bryant has behaved like an absolute clown and shown up the British for what they are, there is another side to the coin. Techie, can you stick up the wonderful Clare Daly? This is her view on everything that's going on just now in the Middle East.
Despite the catastrophic death toll it has inflicted, Israel is losing on the ground and in the court of public opinion. There's no way that this ends that doesn't leave Israel a pariah state with occupation and apartheid on borrowed time, and they know it. So they're doing everything they can. Desperate acts of aggression to provoke a wider conflict with Lebanon, with Iran, with anybody, to draw in the US, to save them from the consequences of their own actions. And as Yemen shows, Butcher Biden is reporting for duty. With Europe's proud genocide by his side, they are the ones who have enabled the continuation of Israeli terror. Without them, it would already be over. So take note, Butcher Biden. The ancestors of the Ireland that you claim to be from disown you. Keep our country out of your mouth. And as for von der Leyen and genocidal Germany, with your words and deeds supporting Israel in the ICJ, not in our name. The people of Europe stand with Palestine and with South Africa.
Fantastic. Why is it the Irish, all the great women politicians, and we get what we get, Lloyd? Every word she said, I'm with. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Clare Daly's. I mean, she's one of the few people that makes watching the European Parliament actually worthwhile. What I love is that, you know, it comes from being independent. The Irish, small, independent, neutral, make their contribution to the United Nations, and as a result, their politicians can get up and say things that our politicians dare not say. And I include in that the UK politicians, because they're bound and tied by the nature of the state that they represent, whereas Clare Daly simply represents the Irish people and is expressing exactly what we're seeing in the streets of all of the towns and cities of Ireland over the past week in support of the Palestinian people. I think she's fantastic. I really do. And the extraordinary thing is that she's absolutely loathed and despised by the political leaders of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, and to some degree, there's a few folk from Sinn Féin look over their shoulder at Clare Daly and wonder maybe they should become pals. Fantastic. And then all she's telling the truth. That is it. And the fact that she has no real concern about stating exactly who is to blame in this circumstance. You know, most politicians who find their way to Strasbourg or Brussels would never, ever dare say anything about the leader of the commission in the manner in which she has said, but she understands the nature of it. The leader of the commission is not elected, therefore should be open entirely to criticism, in fact, way beyond the criticism that elected members are getting. I think it's good to hear some truth for a change.
Absolutely. The same token, Yvonne, I don't have the clip, but David Cameron was getting interviewed in one of the Sunday shows, and he would say, well, I mean, Israel's a democracy and they wouldn't commit a genocide. It's a nonsense. This case by South Africa is just a load of nonsense. There is no genocide. I mean, I remember what we had a discussion about the Section 35, where the judges got up in the court of session. They had a 20 seconds, was it, of conversation and went, no, throughout the appeal by the Scottish Government. I do not understand why the International Court of Justice didn't, at the end of the South African and the Israeli thing, turn around and say, no, you're right, it's a genocide. I'm worried that there's going to be a fudge. Does that concern you?
Look, the whole world knows that there is a genocide unfolding in Gaza, and even Lord Cameron, as David Cameron's now called, even he said just the other day that he's concerned that Israel might not be working within international law. That's him covering his back. But if we can go back to Clare's speech, she was telling the truth. You know, Israel and their allies thought that they'd be able to neutralize Hamas in a matter of hours. There are 30,000 injured Israeli soldiers, 1,000 military vehicles that have been blown up, each containing around 4 to 5 Israeli soldiers. Hundreds of Israeli soldiers are dead, and Israel still has yet to seize and control northern Gaza. We're being fed absolute bullshit. Israel is losing this war in terms of, you know, they said that their strategy and their aim and their end game was to eradicate Hamas, which was ridiculous because they would never be able to do it. The war has not gone well for them. Israel has just announced that the intensive phase of northern Gaza has now ended, and it will soon be over in Khan Yunis as well. This really is code for we are defeated. They couldn't neutralize Hamas. 101 days of unprecedented bombardment, more bombs dropped than in World War II, and all sorts of other comparisons. And Hamas leadership is still virtually intact and fighting. Who have they killed? A few days ago, they killed what they said was a high-value Hamas operative in Lebanon. He was a hostage negotiator, for God's sake. That's hardly a high-value commander. They haven't killed anyone of any significance in Gaza, just a lot of innocent people. Mohammed Diaf, who's the head of the Qasem brigades, he's been killed 9 times by Israel, and he's still wandering around Gaza today, much loved, much admired, and he's become quite a Robin Hood character or a legendary figure. And Israel is going to, or is emerging from this absolutely destroyed. You know, they've lost their reputation as a fighting force. They're called the TikTok army. They've opened themselves to ridicule. They've opened themselves to charges in the Hague, and the lawyers, the South African team, which included a very eloquent Irish lawyer, again, as Lloyd said, you know, the Irish are punching well above their weight because they are an independent nation. They don't kowtow to the likes of America. And in fact, St. Patrick's Day is now going to become so political in America. Biden is going to regret his trip, I think, to Ireland, where he said, you know, this was his country. He had an affinity with the people. Well, the Irish have stuck two fingers up to Biden. They're calling him a butcher and they're telling him to go to hell. This war is costing so many people in so many places such a high price. Apart from obviously the Palestinians, and there still isn't 1 ounce of sympathy for the Palestinians. Keir Starmer addressed the North London Jewish community a few days ago, and he went on and on and on about October the 7th and had not 1 ounce of compassion for the thousands of babies, for the thousands of pregnant women who have died in this indiscriminate carpet bombing by Israel. I keep saying this, and I'll say it until I'm sick. You know, I just don't know if the global South will ever forgive the West, and all of these actions will come back to haunt us. And, you know, we suffered badly from the Iraq war through the 7/7 bombings. I really don't know how all of this injustice is going to manifest itself in Britain today, and I'm quite fearful.
Yeah. I'm delighted that both my children and all my grandchildren live in a BRICS country. I've got to say, if I was a bit younger, I think I'd be up in the sticks as well. Although I have to say, my adopted country of Spain, I'm proud that they refused to take part in the attacking of the Houthis. So that's a great thing. I slightly disagree, Lloyd, a wee bit with that the Israelis are losing the war. I don't think they're winning it, but they're certainly taking a bit of a beating. But to come back to the International Court of Justice, do you have any concern that it will be a fudge and that they'll come up with something that will allow this to continue, and for the US and the UK and the Germans, which, I mean, the people defending the genocide, the Germans with the second worst record ever on genocide, the British, the worst perpetrators of genocides, and the Americans not far behind with what they did to the Native Americans defending a genocide. Will they come up with a fudge to protect those three big Western countries?
I think that's what we all fear, Roddy, and the fear is not just a fear for this particular circumstance and the screaming crime it would be if the Palestinian people of Gaza were not given justice as a result of this case. But what the greatest fear for me is this: if there is not a positive result in favour of the South African case, then international law is dead. Or certainly international criminal law is dead. I'm sure the international financial laws will continue, as they always do, will continue to be agreed to, adhered to, and people will respect. But this that involves humanity, the issues of humanity, and the way that we treat each other, this seems to be less important to our international masters than, you know, as Chris Bryant said, the trade round the Horn of Africa. Yes, Roddy, in straightforward answer, we fear. I think we all do. We all fear that a fudge will happen because we've seen the influence across the world in all areas, the influence of the Zionist diaspora and its influence and effect within our own governments and our own political parties. The fact that we're even having a discussion about the fact that the leader of the Labour Party is a friend of Israel rather than the potential Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. You know, these things are extraordinary. We have politicians who are nailing their colours to a particular mast, who are declaring themselves to be allies of particular countries, while at the same time asking the people of this country to vote for them so that they will be the rulers of the country. It beggars belief. It really does. And yes, I fear a fudge.
Yeah, me too. It really worries me. But what gave me a bit of help is that South Africa, who understand what genocide is and understand what apartheid is, Yvonne, they're also now drawing up papers to take the United States, the UK and Germany and treat them for war crimes and taking them to the International Court. I have got to say, I'm so impressed with what South Africa is doing.
Yes, they're finally living up to the reputation that Nelson Mandela worked so hard to create in South Africa. And, you know, the country has been troubled by a lot of problems from corruption and failing governments. But they have emerged as a beacon of human rights. And when their legal team flew back into Oliver Tambo Airport, they were greeted by a tumultuous crowd who were so proud of what they had done on behalf of South Africa's reputation. And people in South Africa are walking around a lot taller these days because they stand for justice. Sadly, that's something that we can't do in Britain today, and we can't do in Scotland either, because unfortunately we are following very closely to whatever Westminster is up to. Although I was delighted when Humza Yousaf did lash out over the attack on the Houthis by Britain without any discussion in Parliament. They just waded straight in like they did over the Iraq War, totally reckless, joining America without any consultation at all. But the other thing that has emerged out of this International Court of Justice is the coverage of the BBC. I'm not sure if you knew, Roddy, but certainly when I switched on the BBC to watch the opening of the war crimes hearing in The Hague, there was nothing. It wasn't reported. I had to go on to Al Jazeera, which reported it live. The BBC didn't start reporting it until the next day, when the Israeli legal team gave the case to defend themselves. And, you know, the BBC, it can't even say that it is neutral. It is on the side of Israel in all of its reporting. It's obscene.
Yep, it's the exact same in the US, CNN. But the BBC is so bad, I believe they're sending Kirsty Wark and Gravelli over to Brussels for when it comes out, so they can do a documentary on the result. It's the exact same as the Alex Salmond case, where they only gave one side of the story. And that's what they're doing here. It's just absolutely disgusting. But we talk about, you know, the West, Lloyd turning, oh yes, Africa, South Africa, full of corruption and bad governance, really. HS2, COVID, you know, I could go on, the list is endless. It's as if we're, you know, our governance is brilliant and there's no corruption. The UK is as corrupt as it can be. And it's just, you know, everywhere else is bad, but not us, you know. It's these brown people, these black people.
It's but this is what happens in post-imperial countries. You know, can Britain tell itself the truth about its relationship with Africa? No, it can't. Our whole approach is we have to operate on the basis of we are no longer in charge. Therefore, these people are making a mess of it. That has been the post-imperial story. You know, India's a basket case, Pakistan's a basket case, everything is, except America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the white countries. They're not a mess. You know, the ones that we used to run. It's you know, this double narrative is quite extraordinary. But one thing that struck me yesterday when there was this chat about the you know, everyone's going to be sending naval forces to protect the West's trade in the Horn of Africa and in the Gulf, and then to discover that in actual fact the British can't send the ships that they want because they don't have enough sailors or the ships are broken. And I just happened to be at the moment reading a biography of the Scottish King James IV. James IV had a navy currently larger than the Royal Navy at present. He had 38 ships. The Royal Navy doesn't even have 32 ships. This is an absurdity. Here we are, you know, Britain, this great post-imperial power, still pretending to be a power when in actual fact, it really needs to pack up, go home and hand the keys over to somebody else.
Indeed. Well, that's the thing. I was saying, the two big $4 billion each aircraft carriers. One, they can't get enough sailors on. The other one's got a bent prop shaft. They can't get beyond the Isle of Wight before turning back to get fixed. It's a joke. They've got the Type 45, is it Type 45 destroyers, which can't go to the Gulf because when warm water they break down. It is a joke, and they're beating their chest. You know, we've got to, you know, we'll do this, that, and the next thing. It really is quite incredible. Yvonne, you know, going back to, you know, everything, as soon as you mention what's going on in Gaza, they immediately come out with all the terrible atrocities in October the 7th, 40 babies beheaded, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of women raped and pillaged and defiled. You know, this all happened within an hour, because it was only an hour, a few hours that the Palestinians were there before the Israelis reacted. But it's all unraveling. There was no 40 babies beheaded. The Israeli police have dug up trying to find one woman at least that was raped. They can't find anything. So these lies are getting exposed. But it goes back to what you said. The BBC is not saying it. ITV's not saying it. They're still coming out with the lies that babies were killed, women were raped, and it's you must, as soon as you come on, say, well, you condemn Hamas before you talk about anything else.
It's shocking, but if you look at the origins of these stories, one of the main perpetrators is Anthony Blinken, who, like his predecessor, Colin Powell, just stands up and comes out with crap without substantiating it, without any proof or any evidence. And it's shameful. You know, this is a man who represents the most powerful nation on earth. And he is telling the American Congress that Hamas raped women, beheaded babies, baked babies. You know, there's supposed to be this story of a baby that was baked in the oven. Not a single journalist in or out of Israel can find the family of this baby that was supposedly put in an oven and baked. And yet there is the US Secretary of State telling Congress without blinking once that this all happened. And I don't know if they hold their politicians to account in the same way as they do in Westminster, where if a minister lies, then he has
to gets a promotion.
Has to apologise. I just don't know. It's shameful, and so many reputations are being destroyed through this genocidal war, and the reputations of Britain, America. You know, they are dismissing the Hague case, but they are privately very, very worried about it. because we all think that it's a clear case of genocide. Quite how the verdict will come, we've yet to see. But they are genuinely worried about it because there will be repercussions coming from this. It's gosh, if ever Scotland needed to be independent, it is now. We get as far away from London as possible so that we don't get caught up in the fallout of this disgusting English state, which has tied itself to Israel and America without condition.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true. I heard, and I can't confirm it, but I believe Blinken's one of the many Americans with dual nationality. He also carries an Israeli passport. I don't know if that's true. I read it somewhere. So if anyone can confirm it or deny it, let me know. But on that, I believe if the ICJ find in favour of Israel, that they're going to change their name to O.J. Simpson land, because it would be as big a bloody travesty of justice if they get away with this. And as a journalist, Lloyd, and you as well, Yvonne, but I read and confirmed that in the 101 days, Lloyd, more journalists have been killed in Gaza than were killed in the entire Second World War on all the fronts. Can you believe that? And can people envisage how bad that is?
I think what's horrifying about it is when I think about it, the phrase that comes into my mind is one that was used regularly in politics and in journalism, which is controlling the narrative. Now, this is some way to control the narrative by Israel, by killing those that would tell you the narrative from the other side. And it is clear, and it is very, very clear, that this has been a specific policy of the Israelis to find and kill journalists, filmmakers, commentators, particularly Palestinians. The methods that they've used by using tracking mobile phones, tracking satellite phones. There is no excuse for this whatsoever. And there's of course there's no excuse, but most importantly of all, there is no justification for this whatsoever. But this is the nature of the state of Israel and its mindset. Its mindset is that they can do no wrong. They are right. That they have to, at all costs, the preservation of the state of Israel will be done at any cost to anyone, no matter what. The fact of the matter is, for any state to control the narrative by killing the messengers is a state that is in a circumstance of failure, utter moral bankruptcy. But that's the nature of the state of Israel. But what I find extraordinary is journalists at the BBC, journalists on ITV, at Sky, have not expressed the same concern as they have for the few journalists who were either wounded or killed in the Ukrainian conflict. And I find that double standard quite extraordinary, quite extraordinary. And I think as an ex-deputy head of chapel in the National Union of Journalists, I would hang my head in shame. Every single member of the National Union of Journalists needs to hang their head in shame for the fact that they are not standing up and talking about the fact that their colleagues and co-workers, because they're Palestinian, can be killed willy-nilly by the Israeli state, and we stand by and watch and say nothing. It's dreadful.
Yeah, but it's not just there. I mean, if you actually think Western journalists who are courtiers in the main, most of them are courtiers. When you think what's happened to Julian Assange, to Craig Murray being in prison, to Gonzalo Lira, who had an American citizen murdered in a Ukrainian jail, and the journalists say nothing, not a word. What was that? The famous phrase, first they came for the communists and I said nothing. They should learn that lesson. Moving on a bit, Yvonne, I'd hoped to have on Professor Miller on here, David Miller, but he was unable to join us today. Now, when he was on speaking to me about, this is long before the conflict began on October the 7th, way back, I don't know, about a year ago, he did not think that a two-state solution then was viable or possible. Does this conflict, you think, make it more likely or less likely that we can have a two-state solution?
I think it makes it less likely. I noticed that Keir Starmer has done a U-turn on recognising Palestine as an individual state, and he says that the only way forward is a two-state solution. Anybody who believes in a two-state solution is talking out of their backside, because to enable a two-state solution, you've got the West Bank, which is split up into 6 little islands, surrounded by checkpoints, surrounded by the apartheid wall, and surrounded, more importantly, by more than 500,000 illegal settlers. And these illegal settlers are so barking mad and lawless that America has refused to give American visas to them because they don't want them back. Most of them come from America, and they think that they're in the Wild West, and they're shooting Palestinians like fish in a barrel. They're responsible, along with the army, for more than 425 deaths in the occupied West Bank. Lloyd and I have both been there and seen, and to realistically have a two-state solution, you would have to move more than 500,000 illegal settlers from the stolen lands and put them somewhere like Tel Aviv. Well, the Israelis in Tel Aviv do not want the settlers anywhere near them. They look at them disparagingly, and so you've got this huge problem of what to do with 500,000 barking mad, zealous Zionist settlers, who, by the way, have the full support of all the barking mad 5 million Christian Zionists who follow Trump. And so you've got that for a start off, and how you're going to work it out, I just don't know, because the West Bank, you know, is a series of about half a dozen islands surrounded by all these military checkpoints. We call Gaza the largest open-air prison. In fact, somebody called it a concentration camp the other day. But at least, well, before the war, Palestinians in Gaza could move around freely. But in the West Bank, people can't move freely at all. In fact, there's a long-standing, well, it's not so much a joke, it's an observation, that if Mary and Joseph set off on their trip from Nazareth to Bethlehem, they'd never get there because of these Israeli checkpoints. It's impossible. You can't travel freely. So two-state solution, it's dead and buried, and it would be impossible to maintain.
So what is the solution?
Well, I would say, first of all, ask the Palestinians. The Palestinians want their land back. That's, you know, for the last 75 years, 76 years, all they have said is, we want the right of return, we want our land back. And under international law, they have the right of return. and they will get their land back. Under international law, the Israelis, as occupiers of stolen land, actually don't have the right of resistance. And this is one of the main points that came out in The Hague by the South African legal team. Because the first thing that any politician will tell you is Israel has a right to defend itself. Actually, no, it doesn't. Under international law, as the occupier of those stolen lands, they do not have the right of self-defense. Because what are they defending? They're in lands that they shouldn't be in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why the Hague, again, is going to be so important, because a lot of these issues will be decided. And by the way, the Palestinians have the right to resist the occupation under international law. They have the right to fight back. But Israel, as the occupier, does not have the right.
Quite right, too. The other thing that happens all the time, Lloyd, they're talking about, you know, the 150 hostages that are still being held by Hamas. I wonder now with the carpet bombing, etc., whether a lot of them will still be alive or not. But what is never mentioned, again, by our Western corrupt media, is that since this started, everyone's alluded to it, almost 500 people in the West Bank, where there's no Hamas, have been killed by the Israelis. But there's been 8,000 Palestinians taken into custody by the Israelis. And no one's saying, Nikki Haley, one of the presidential candidates for the Republican nomination in America, said, we need to bring our people home, she said. And when she was standing there, no one mentions the 8,000, and that's on top of about another 10,000 that are already in Israel, rotting in Israeli prisons. No one mentions them. It's the double standards again.
Absolutely. It's like Israel. Israel operates on the basis of if you take one of ours, we take 10 of yours. If you kill one
Sounds
of ours,
familiar.
we kill 10 of yours. You know, it's this constant upping the ante. But what's upsetting, and really, really upsetting, I think, for the families themselves, is that the world doesn't know about this mass hostage taking, because that's all it is. The use of administrative detention, which of course is based on the emergency power laws left by the British after the mandate in Palestine. The Israelis simply saw them as being the most effective and the most efficient, what they would term anti-terrorism laws, so they just took them on board, and you're using them to this day. But the fact that there are, in excess of 4,000 people who are in jail, being held in jail conditions as if they were convicted when they've never even been charged with anything.
No.
Now, how can you dare say that Israel is a democracy if it jails 4,000 and 5,000 and 6,000 people without charges at all? It's an absurd, absolutely absurd situation. But we know why they're doing it. Everything is about Israel's ability to negotiate. It wants as many counters on its side of the negotiation as it possibly can get. And effectively, it's using these people, the people of the West Bank, the people who've been arrested and jailed, it's using them as the counters.
Indeed, I think they should take Bertie instead, Yvonne. You've been very naughty today. But that's it. But the West will never acknowledge what's going on there, Yvonne. And this is why I'm so concerned about the International Court of Justice and the UN. If we look at the UN, it bows to America on every occasion, not just on Israel. We found with the Nord Stream, they managed to stop that being investigated. We know why they stopped it being investigated. They protect 62 resolutions the Israelis have broken. Iraq broke 2 and got bombed back to the Middle Ages. Nothing happens to Israel. And so the Israelis quite rightly think, well, we're above the law. We can do what we like because America will always protect us in the UN, in the International Court of Justice. I don't know what they're doing or what they're up to. The EU does what the US tells them. People who think from Scotland's point of view that they can go to the International Court of Justice or the UN and get justice for Scotland are kidding themselves on, because it's so influenced by America. And that's why we have 30,000 dead Palestinians.
Well, you just have to look at America. You know, on the 22nd of this month will be the 23rd anniversary of Guantanamo. Yes, there are still men being held in Guantanamo without trial, without charge, who have been tortured and cannot be put through a court because any evidence that they have given was given under torture. So all of that evidence is inadmissible. And yet the Americans still won't release them. It's so, you know, what sort of example is America sending out to the rest of the world? Every tyrant dictator, you know, oh, look, America can hold people without trial, without charge. So we can do the same. And that's, of course, the Israelis inherited their administrative detention, as Lloyd said, from the British mandate. It's really history. You just have to look at our history, and we should hang our head in shame. That's why, you know, I look at the butcher's apron, as I call the Union flag, and I just don't want to see that flying anywhere in Scotland, because it represents so much injustice and blood of innocence that we've got symbols of this imperialism all over. And of course, it's all coming to a head now. The International Court of Justice ruling will be, you know, we are at a crossroads. And we either believe in the rule of law or we don't. And God help us if they throw this court case out, because what sort of message is that sending to the rest of the world?
You wonder. We're coming towards the end here, Lloyd. We quoted him before in a previous programme we were doing, Kissinger, who recently died, talking about to be an enemy of America is, you know, bad. To be a friend is fatal. One little President Zelensky's finding that, because since the whole conflict in the Middle East, Ukraine has been dumped. They can't get any money, they can't get any weapons, they've been thrown aside in favour of Israel. Surely this, we were talking a little bit about the global south, but surely what America and the West don't see is that the global south and the rest of the world, the majority of countries are looking, you know, the Americans are also grabbing 300 billion of Russian assets to give to Ukraine. They must be looking and thinking, you know what? I think BRICS and multipolarity is the way forward, because the UN, the US and the West, the EU, they're not worth spit.
Yeah, I think that's the conclusion that a lot of countries are coming to. But I think it's not just because of the circumstances we have right at this very moment. These people have been watching from the outside and have been used and abused by, you know, the global north for the best part of 2 centuries. So the change is coming. Nothing stays the same. You know, it's a bit like the circumstance here in our own country, where people scream and shout about, oh, we must get back into Europe. We must, you know, Scotland must be in the European Union. They do it as if, you know, these things are permanent and they don't shift. The fact of the matter is, you have to approach things on the basis of where the world is at today, at this moment, and where you want to be at some point in the future. It's great having this discussion, but wouldn't it be so much better if we were having this discussion from the perspective of our country, our government, being a member of the United Nations, could influence the United Nations, you know, to have that level of power where the people who are walking in our streets and have been marching in the streets in support of Palestine over the past 100 days would actually feel that they could have a government that would represent what they actually think about things. You know, there's nothing brings to clarity more than this circumstance of an issue of foreign affairs where the people of our country have a very specific view, which is completely and utterly at odds with the view of the rulers of the country, namely the Westminster Parliament.
Here. And that is a discussion, my dear friends, we will have at the weekend in depth. Can I thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope our viewers have enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed talking to you, because it is a worry that this escalates, and we could really, this is the closest in my life, in my 7 decades, I think we've been to World War III, than even the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm genuinely afraid, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. But until we see you again at the weekend, ladies and gentlemen, may you and yours stay safe and well. Take care now.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.